Darkness had swallowed the world outside as Claire sat in her car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Her breath fogged the windshield, obscuring the looming shape of the abandoned motel ahead. She hadn't wanted to come back to this place. Every fiber of her being screamed to drive away, but she couldn't. Not after what she'd seen. Not after what had started following her. It had begun innocently enough. Just a night out with friends, laughter, and drinks under the dim lights of a bar. But as she stumbled home that night, something was wrong. She felt it, a pressure, like being watched. Yet when she turned, there was no one. The sensation had grown over the following days, an invisible weight pressing in on her, suffocating. But no matter where she went, no one was there. Until the night she saw it for the first time. It had been standing just at the edge of her bedroom window. A shape, blurry and featureless, just beyond the glass, perfectly still, but staring, watching. Her heart had pounded so violently she could barely breathe. She blinked, and it was gone. The next day she saw it again, closer this time, at the foot of her bed. The more Claire tried to flee, the closer it came, step by slow, inevitable step. And then she understood. It followed. It never ran, never hurried, just followed, relentless and patient. She couldn't stop it, couldn't hide. She was trapped, and the worst part was no one else could see it. They thought she was losing her mind. Her friends, her family, all dismissed her frenzied warnings. They couldn't help her. They wouldn't even try. Now Claire was back at the motel, the last place she had felt safe. It was miles from any town, the perfect place to isolate herself. Maybe here she could find a way to slow it down. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Nothing could stop it. She glanced in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. For now. She opened the car door and stepped out into the cold night, her boots crunching against the gravel of the empty parking lot. A chill hung in the air, and an unnatural silence settled over the place. Even the wind refused to stir. Her feet dragged her toward the motel's entrance, an ominous shadow lurking in the dim light of a flickering neon sign. The paint peeled from the building's sides like decaying flesh, and the door creaked on rusted hinges as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick, musty, like the room hadn't been disturbed in decades. The lobby was eerily still, the only light a faint yellow glow spilling from a dusty lamp in the corner. Claire felt a pang of dread, knowing it was already near. It was always near. She stepped deeper into the room, each step echoing unnaturally loud. Her breathing quickened as she felt the familiar weight on her shoulders, like eyes burning into her back. She whipped around. Nothing. Just the empty room. But it was here. She could feel it. Moving cautiously, Claire ascended the stairs, their creaking filling the silence like the rasp of bones against wood. Her heart thundered in her chest as she reached her room, fumbling with the key. Her hands were slick with sweat, trembling uncontrollably, but she finally managed to shove the key into the lock and push the door open. Inside, the room was as she had left it. The bed, unmade, the curtains drawn. The old television in the corner flickered with static, though she hadn't turned it on. Her skin prickled. It was close now. She locked the door behind her, though she knew it wouldn't help. It never did. Still, she crossed the room and pulled the heavy dresser against the door, blocking it with whatever she could find. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she collapsed on the bed, curling into herself, as if shrinking into the smallest space could make her invisible. Maybe this time, it would just pass by. Maybe it wouldn't find her. The television flickered again, louder, filling the room with a low, persistent hum. Claire covered her ears, her eyes squeezed shut. But then she heard it, the sound she dreaded most, a faint tap, tap, tap at the door. Her heart stopped. It was here. She lay frozen, every muscle in her body locked in terror. The tapping continued, slow, deliberate. Each knock rattled her bones, shaking her resolve. It wasn't in a hurry. It never was. It had all the time in the world, but Claire didn't. She slid off the bed, moving as quietly as possible, her eyes never leaving the door. The tapping stopped, replaced by silence so absolute it felt like the world was holding its breath. And then the doorknob rattled. Claire's heart pounded in her throat as she backed away, eyes wide, her back pressing against the far wall. The door groaned under the weight of something pushing from the other side. It wasn't forcing its way in, not yet. It was testing her, reminding her that it could come inside any time it wanted. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her shaking breath when the sound stopped. The room fell into an oppressive quiet once more. Her chest heaved as she waited, paralyzed by the tension, unable to move, her mind screaming for her to do something, anything. But her body betrayed her. Slowly, as if taunting her, the door creaked open, an inch, then another, before the dresser stopped it. The space beyond the crack was inky black. Nothing moved, but she knew it was there, waiting. With a shuddering breath, Claire stepped forward. If she was going to face it, she had to do it now. She could no longer run. Gripping a heavy lamp, she approached the door, her body trembling, her knuckles white. The air grew colder with every step. And then, without warning, an impossibly long shadow slithered under the door, twisting and coiling like a serpent. It stretched across the floor, inching toward her. She stumbled back, eyes wide with horror. It was in the room. The lamp fell from her hands, shattering, plunging the room into total darkness. The only light now came from the flickering television. She could barely see, but she felt it closing in, felt the cold fingers of dread clawing at her throat. A whisper, barely audible, brushed against her ear. "It's over." Something brushed her ankle. She screamed. Claire's scream echoed through the room, but the shadow didn't stop. It slithered across the floor like a liquid darkness, enveloping everything in its path. Her back hit the wall, breath ragged, as she desperately searched for a way out. But there was none. There never had been. Her pulse pounded in her ears as the room closed in, shrinking with each passing second. She could feel it now. Cold, oppressive. Something she couldn't see, but knew was right there, inches away. It was like the air itself was suffocating her, squeezing her lungs until every breath became a struggle. The television flickered again, the static shifting into a distorted image, though Claire barely registered it. Her heart seized in terror when she heard a voice, her voice coming from the TV, garbled and twisted. "It's too late." She gasped, staggering backward as the shadow crept up her legs. Her skin crawled as it wrapped around her body, icy fingers brushing against her flesh. She thrashed, trying to shake it off, but the more she struggled, the tighter its grip became. The darkness swallowed the room. She couldn't see anything anymore, just the cold, crushing void. And she felt herself sinking, falling into an abyss that had no end. There was no light, no sound, just an all-consuming emptiness, pulling her deeper and deeper. Then for the briefest moment she felt a presence, cold, ancient, malevolent, pressing against her mind. It whispered to her, not in words, but in feelings, a primal terror older than time itself. She was never going to escape. Her body went limp, her strength drained. The fight was gone, her mind unraveling in the endless dark. And just as the last shred of her will slipped away, the door burst open with a loud crack. Blinding light flooded the room. For a second, Claire thought she was free. She gasped, lungs filling with air, her eyes fluttering open to the sight of the motel room bathed in brilliant light. The shadow was gone. The pressure had lifted. She was alive. But then, she saw it. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the harsh light, was the shape. Blurry, indistinct, but unmistakable. It hadn't stopped. It never would. It was waiting. Claire's heart sank into a pit of dread so deep she could barely think. The thing outside was patient. She understood now. No matter how far she ran, no matter where she hid, it would always find her. Always wait. Always follow. Her time had run out, and as she stared into the soulless void where its eyes should have been, the last thing Claire felt before everything went black was the gentle, icy touch of its hand on her shoulder. In the end, there was only silence.